Welcome back to Absolute Idaho. Let's continue with the stool. So like I said, it's really important to actually tack everything down before you weld it, and clamp it too, because if you don't clamp it, you're going to get warpage, and even sometimes with clamping you get warpage. So it kind of depends on how much heat you're putting to the metal and whatnot. But I'm sure most of you are welders and you know all this. But so what I do is I actually flip the thing over after I've tack welded it, and I've already welded this. I'm just showing you, but I just got done welding it. But this is actually the clamps I use. I just clamp this plate right down to the table so I know it's a nice flat surface. I clean it off first, clamp it down, clamp it to the table so it can't move at all when I'm doing this. That keeps the whole frame nice and square and true on the bottom so that I don't get warpage in there. Otherwise I got to come up with some kind of feet, and I don't want to do that. So I welded all these down. Here, let me get these out of the way. And you can actually see I just went through and welded pretty decent welds on some of those. These are the ones in the front I told you about I was going to weld. Quick welds, I mean, those are some fast welds I've done. All they do is just basically cover up any kind of an oxygen penetration moment for when I'm welding the other side, which is what everybody's going to see. So that's my welds. Now I'm going to flip it over and finish welding on the other side. So now I've got that welded on the bottom for the most part. I don't think I need to do any more welds under there. Well, that's not really true, but for the base itself I don't. So now I'm going to actually flip it over. And in theory, if you did it right, I mean, it's got a tiny bit of rock. That could be something on the table. Yeah, see, I have no... It's nice and square. It welded true. And now I've got to actually finish welding in this 90-degree bevel I've got here, which is my relief cut when I did it on the plasma table. And along here, just make some pretty welds along here, because this is what everybody's going to actually see. I'll do some pretty welds along here. Are they structural? Yeah. Do they need this much welding? No. But, again, it goes back to the look of it. I mean, I am actually an artist welder, so I like to actually see the weld. I think it's one of the more beautiful parts of the whole thing, regardless of what the weld's on. So when I get done, it should look something like this. Kind of hard to see maybe, but you can kind of see the welds there. I mean, they're not awesome, but they kind of add some of that industrial look, and I do like that a lot. There's the back. That's what they're going to look like, and there's going to be 4 of them. So anyway, that's what I'm after, and I will continue welding and show you when I get them all 3 done, and I'll show you some of the posts I'm going to put in. So like I showed you guys, this is the vertical post. Obviously it's got an angle to it, 18.5 degrees. At an angle for the post, I'm going to start cutting those out on the bandsaw. That material is 2x4. That's actually this stuff here, so 4x2. And I've already got it set for 18.5. Got it clamped in. Pretty much all I got to do is raise this baby up and turn it on. So I cut these out of expanded metal, obviously, to fit the contour of the base. And then I actually put them in sulfuric acid for about 6 hours, just to kind of take off the rough edge, because these are pretty dang sharp when you get them, because they've been actually pushed and they haven't actually been cleaned up. And I don't want anybody's fingers or anything to go over them and get cut, so I do that on a lot of things actually. But I'm going to actually weld them. actually cut them and put them in here. Hopefully you can see that. Just tack weld them. That's kind of what the other one has. And I got one for the other side, obviously. I'll just weld them up. So here you can see I've got my 3 bar stool vertical risers that come up from the bases cut out. They're at 18.5 degrees. Not if that means anything to you guys, mostly to me. Also cut 3 basically just caps. I'm going to weld on the end because this will be like the bottom, and I want that to ride on the floor because it's on a concrete floor, but I don't want, if you don't have this on there, obviously the edges of this are going to start digging into the floor if it's not perfectly level. And those are the 3 bases. I got all of the side pieces welded on all of them. They look kind of cool. And so now I'm just going to continue on. I'm going to go ahead and weld these pieces on, these little flat bar pieces on, and I'll actually start mounting them. And you'll notice I don't generally, you don't generally see me put a ground clamp for welding on any of the stuff. That's the best part of having a metal table you're welding to. You just stick the ground right to the table, and then anything that's metal touches the metal table, it grounds through that. Negative is sometimes you'll get pinholes, not pinholes, but connection points where it actually get pretty hot where the electricity's flowing. No, it's not that big a deal. Most times you can't even see it. So here I'm gonna just tack weld this on. This will be that bottom piece. Pretty well. Not that that matters. Nobody's going to see her. And I'll continue on like that, times 3. So I got those the 3 caps welded on the end of it. Now I'm going to weld the top piece, the mount plate to the post, and this is what those swivel bases mount to. I got it marked out so I'm mostly square on the post there, and I'll just tack weld that, and then once I know it's correct, I'm just going to go to town and weld up all 3. So here you can see I've actually well, for one, I told you about warpage. This is a 1/4 inch plate. This is an 1/8 inch plate, which I weld them together. Ironically, it's the 1/4 inch plate that's actually going to draw. It's going to actually warp on me if I don't have it clamped down. So I've got some pretty good size clamps on about the center point of where I'm going to be welding on both sides. And then I also have a clamp right here on the front side where there's a little more leverage. This is a little offset or whatever. So anyway, very important. You guys probably all know that, but I'm just pointing it out. And then the other thing you got to do before, I've only got one tack weld on this whole thing right now, so I can actually move, this side to side. I can move it back and forth, but there's really no reason to because my reveal is good all along here. But the one thing you got to make sure you do, even though you think your bandsaw might be cutting perfectly straight, and mine's pretty good, but it's off a tiny bit. So before I actually go and start welding, a final weld bead around this whole thing, I just double check. I just make sure that, this is actually, that's tight on the surface. You got a true 90 degree here, and you check both sides. Usually if you have one side, both sides are good to go, but it's still, it's still good. See, like that one's even slightly off, just a little bit, so I'm going to have to hold that in place when I actually start welding. Is it that big a deal? No, but if this is off, that makes the top of that off too, and that's a bad thing. So Anyway, just another thing I do, and I'll start welding. You guys can watch. Well, you can try and watch. I'm going to pull this over a little bit and make sure it's nice and true and plumb and 90 degrees. I like it right there. I'm going to tack weld it. Looks pretty good. Yep, I like it. So I've got one of the bases here. I cleaned off the table so that it actually has got a smooth surface with no weld spatter or anything. It's got a little dust, obviously, but that's fine. So I'm going to bring it up, make sure it sits flat. It does. Now it's time to actually fit that post into there at that angle, that 18.5 degrees. So I finished welding up that post. I got it welded all the way around. And you know, obviously the other end, which you guys saw, and I put a clamp on it. Sometimes that eases the insertion of this into that hole I've made. Sometimes I need it, sometimes I don't. Well, this one probably would have gone. Now I take the clamp off. Work it down. Got a little tightness to it. There we go. So that's kind of what it's going to look like. Pretty cool, huh? And now I just got to, I've got to actually clamp this base down so it doesn't move on me. And I got to make sure that this thing is actually sitting nice and flat on the floor, or excuse me, the table. Same surface this is on. And I can pretty much just weld it up. I got the post in, coming all the way up. As you can see, it's actually level. And the other part I got to make sure is that the base of that post is actually sitting flush on the desk or the weld table. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's sitting pretty flush down there. That's what I want. So now it's actually in a weldable state. I just got to make sure that you know, it's got 90 degrees off of that, just like I did when I welded up everything else. Make sure it's actually sitting plumb these directions, and finish weld it, and I'll weld all the way around the base of that. And then in theory that whole thing is ready now for a chair seat on the top, which is going to be hickory, and then some angle iron on both sides and a backer for your back to rest on. So we're almost there.